Friday, and McConnell Manor was kind enough to offer us a place to meet. And so first, and I want to make sure that we thank them, and we'll be mentioning that later on. This is the second meeting that we have. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Mark MacDonald. I'm a community activist. We had a meeting over at the Air Force Wing, and the meeting is with respect to the future use of the General Hospital. Now, I had some people helping me out, Josh Welch, and he texted me a little while ago. He's running late. He's going to be here shortly. And Emily Ladisare MacDonald. They're grade 12 students, and they're studying social science in high school, and they're taking it on as a project that they're studying in high school. We talked about the future use of the General Hospital, and the main focus was senior issues, long-term care beds, social housing, wheelchair accessible housing for seniors. You know, there was a number of issues. It wasn't just about long-term care beds. The discussion at the last meeting, we talked about, had there been any proposals put forward, and at that point we hadn't heard of anything firm with respect, you know, to if somebody had put a firm offer in on the hospital. So there was a unanimous motion at that meeting. We contacted the minister. We sent a letter to the minister, and we informed her that we had the meeting, that we had a community group that was concerned about the future use of the hospital, and we asked her in the letter, would she at least hold off on the sale until we had an opportunity to put a proposal in. So we wrote the minister. The minister responded rather quickly, right away the next day. She responded and said that the hospital would not be sold, that they have the final say, the Minister of Health has the final say, and that they're prepared to welcome any proposals that come from the community. But at this point, there has been no proposals put forward from the community. So then at the same time, or around that same time, we wrote the mayor and informed him that we had held a public meeting. And the mayor wrote back to us and said that they were going to hear from the hospital board, and they heard from the hospital board on the 28th at their last council meeting. And at that meeting, the CEO for the hospital announced that the sale was non-negotiable. In other words, it was already a done deal. But that's contrary to what the minister is saying. So we're proceeding with the minister having the final say. In other words, if we want to put a proposal in, or what our vision is for the hospital as we move forward, she's prepared to entertain those ideas. So the bottom line is, it's very much negotiable. That brings us to the meeting today. Now I'm going to introduce Andre Rivette. Andre Rivette is a Cornwall City Councillor. He's been a strong advocate of making sure that the hospital stays for the use of the common good of the community, with the social benefits and with the focus on seniors, long-term care housing, social housing or wheelchair accessible housing, those types of things. So Andre's going to speak some more of that, and then Andre is going to take questions if we have any questions. Councillor Andre Rivette.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see a good crowd here this evening. Good evening. I think that Mark I got to commend him for not letting this thing drop, because you have to have public involvement to make sure that the ministry understands. As you know, we had a meeting with the health board with the Chantal Leclerc a few weeks ago. That was the task force. We asked last March to have that task force put into place. It never happened until she came to us and realized that she only does the program. She doesn't do the buildings themselves. So I'm just going to give you my idea of what's needed here to make it work. I think the first thing we need to is a local task force with the mandate to review the needs for senior long-term care beds, and what they're calling them now is rehab beds. They call them what they want, but we need them here. And the feasibility of using the General Hospital for a variety of healthcare services and others. Mark has talked about the senior housing, handicap accessible housing. He knows, being on the coronary housing board, as I was, there's a big need for that stuff too. I think and by having the task force in place, they're going to be able to come in and give you the information, facts, instead of having somebody stand up and say it's going to cost $72 million to renovate it. They don't have a clue. They're pulling numbers out of the air. I think that's the kind of information we have to have. Now I'm going to say that I spoke to Mark earlier. I just made a few notes here. The partners that must be at the table, and I can't stress that enough, that must be at the table, is the Minister of Health representative with the directives to make this local task force happen. With a hold on the sale of the General Hospital until the task force report is completed. I think that, as Mark said, the hospital board came before us last week, and one of the comments were, and I caught it, that they had to get the approval of the minister, but the minister hasn't given the approval yet. It's still in the works, so it's not a done deal. So I think that Mark, with the letters you sent to the minister, I think I would tend to believe what you're getting out of that one. I think it's also important to have the LIN involved with Chantal Leclerc. This is the buffer between healthcare and the government. The reason why you want her there, because she funds the programs. So that's important to have her at that table to understand, because they talk about they're ready to work with partners or for partnerships. Well, I think that's a facility that could use a lot of partnerships, and I think that the minister would be very, how would I say, surprised with the amount of things you could do with that hospital without tearing it down. I don't believe that it's in that bad a shape. I really don't until the task force takes a look at it. I think it's important to have the hospital, somebody from the hospital board there, because they own the General, and they would be able to give us some background information on it, and so we could follow up and check and see whether or not that's fact. I think there's we need some members from the senior community to be involved. They know what they're looking for. They know what's acceptable to the seniors. I think it's very important to have the mayor involved, and also the warden of the SD&G counties, because this is not just for Cornwall, it's the whole SD&G participate. They use that, they would use that. I can tell you that it's been a frustrating challenge, and I was happy Mark got involved, because I think you got to get people involved. I think what you have to do, Mark, I think that if you have a petition with 1,000 names from the senior homes, I think that would be important. I'm prepared to bring that petition back to council, requesting that we support a letter to the minister, requesting what we're asking for. And I think, I'm sure the counties would jump on board too. Because as I said, once they get rid of this hospital, that's it. That's it, there's no more. I mean, and anybody knows that in the near future, next 5 or 10 years, we're going to need that. I've asked from our social housing person who's in charge of social housing, the senior homes on Augustus, and we have other senior homes that the city operate through their apartments. I asked her for I'd like to know the average age for every person in that building. What's the average age? So if the average age is 85 years old, then that's going to tell you it could be a need down the road the next 3 or 4 years. They'll need more long-term care. And we were told by the manager of Glenstone Lodge, who made this proposal or presentation of budget, that when the seniors now come into the long-term care there, they have more. It's a high maintenance, so that's the thing. So he indicated by the end of the year, the 4th floor of the Glenstone Lodge is going to be all high maintenance. So that's telling us it's coming. So I think we got to be prepared. But again, Mark, I'd like to commend you, and I would strongly suggest that you have somebody go to different senior homes. You're just helping them along, because you're making sure, and they want to make sure, that when somebody needs long-term care support, the facility will be there. So thank you.
It's a public consultation meeting, so Andre's our representative on City Council that's trying to further the issue on City Council. So if there was any questions, Andre's also a member of the Health Board in Cornwall. So if anybody had any questions, this would be a good opportunity. Go ahead.
Hey, Andre.
If you want to state your name and just try to speak clearly so everybody...
I'm Daniel Donati. Right. I kind of represent probably a majority of the population that is not completely informed of what's going on. But, you know, like there's only a few that know exactly what's going on. But what's going to happen to the alcohol and drug abuse center if that gets shut down? Like, are we gonna increase the police force by maybe 10, 20 policemen? What's gonna happen?
You're totally right, Dan. I can tell you that London, Ontario, you know, we've cut back in healthcare. In London, Ontario, for the mental health care responses, they just go there if there's a problem. They spent $12 million in the police department for mental health response calls only. That's because the healthcare system has dropped that portion off. Now the seniors, they cut back on long-term care. I can tell you from personal experience with one of my relatives that a couple times until he was placed in the home, so he could probably get the proper setting, and because he had Alzheimer's, it can be tough on a caregiver, very, very tough, you know. And that's an issue. Sometimes the police have to respond. And it's just to take them to the hospital, give them a needle, come back home, and they're fine. You know, it's not something that's. So I think that, and you're right. And I've mentioned that to chief police because I also sit on the police board. That's one of my concerns. You know, we're always talking about the police cost. Well, if they're dropping that healthcare systems and parts like that, well, there's only one person that can respond that works 24/7, and that's the police. And that's where we have to. If they're going to do that, well, then they better put some dollars with it from the Ministry of Health to offset that cost. So it can be very costly for the police departments and the taxpayers as well.
Somebody over here had a...
And Albert Buzz, I live in the manor here. My question is, how are the doctors? Are they behind it?
Well, I said I don't know because I never spoke with them, but I think it's through the grapevines you're hearing that, you know, some of them are not crazy about it. I can tell you some of the nurses are not, because they can't understand why you're closing down a perfect facility. The drug addiction program won't be what it is now. It's going to be, you know, the healthcare is not there, is what it is. I mean, as I told council the other night, the province has dropped the ball. Let's us not drop the ball.
Well, I want to know whether the doctors are going to support it if we decide to go.
Well, I can tell you the Ministry of Health is probably going to get some action to that. I don't know.
Haven't you approached the doctors?
No, I haven't. No, because the ministry has to make the decision whether or not they're going to keep the hospital. You know, until they do the task force. If you don't do the task force, you get the information you need, and that's part of the information you'd probably pick up. You might as well, you're banging your head against the wall. If you haven't got the Ministry of Health is backing to say, make this thing happen, find out what that hospital is, and the need is there. And if we don't do that, if you don't have them on board, forget it.
Okay, we're going to take a question from over here. Just 1 second. Just with respect to the comment about are the doctors involved, I have been approached personally by some individuals that have some doctors that want to be involved. In other words, if we move the ball forward with a community health center, you know, centered around seniors and looking after their issues, whether it's long-term care or social housing or wheelchair accessible, they want to be involved. They want to be involved. Okay.
I just thought I'd mention, my name is Marianne, that whether the hospital realizes it or not, there is a benefit for the hospital, because as crises erupt with our aging population, the currently old and the soon-to-be old, which I would be in that category, the less opportunities we have to care for our most vulnerable people are going to, it's going to gather momentum is what I'm saying, and everybody's going to show up on the doorstep of the hospital and everything will be in crisis. So whether the hospital realizes that now, and I'm sure they have, and they're just not saying, we also need to prevent crises of that sort down the road.
In chronic hospital.
Yes,
yes. And I think that Chantal Leclerc I got that commitment from her the other day. When I said, what happens if you have a backup in a chronic care hospital with seniors that can't find long-term care? She said, I would put an emergency situation looking for rooms very quickly. Well, if she feels that way, then she should have a problem supporting a task force.
Yes.
Stephen Welsh. I just wanted to make a comment. I was watching the council meeting last Monday at home, and they were speaking about the 2nd Street site have they heard yet from the ministry whether or not that there will be the moratorium, or is there anything that's happening there, or?
The minister has to get the approval for the sale, and the ministry hasn't done that yet. The minister hasn't done that yet. So they're in limbo. They're not going anywhere until the minister, and what Mark got from the minister is telling me that she's not going to approve anything until some of the situation, because they don't want any, there's an election coming up in the spring, and that means a lot. They don't want no, rough waters there. So,
okay.
And I think that now we have Bernadette, who is going to be on there with the, what do they call it, the helping the premier to set up her cabinet. We got, she's got a key to the premier's ear. So I think it's important.
Yeah, because they were also talking about discussing, like the MacDonald site is going to be primarily acute care, but then they're going to be stretched probably once that building is complete. And there's already people that are concerned. I've been speaking to a lot of people in the community, and there's a lot of concern about, there's already people waiting in the current senior facilities, waiting, and what's going to happen if people have to send their loved ones 100 miles out of town, because there's no facilities available. And then not only that, but we have that facility on 2nd Street, which is still a very good building in good condition, that can be used to facilitate the addiction services, mental health. And I also have, my wife has a nephew that's autistic, and they had a hard time trying to place him for months too. And and this is another possibility that can be looked at as well, is people with severe handicap. There's also a problem there in trying to facilitate places for them as well.
I don't think there'd be any problem filling that up with things that's needed in the community to make sure we get proper health care. And I can tell you, I was shocked to hear come out of the administrators most at our meeting the other day that that's not their responsibility. It's just acute care. Hold on. If you're in the healthcare system, you might not be your job, but at least you should have some concerns at seniors and making sure they have the quality of life. They were the pillars of this community.
That's right.
And we got to make sure that we support them. As simple as that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rivette.
Yeah, I got to get back to my meeting. I'm sorry, I got a budget meeting. I have to get back to it, City Hall. I'll try to keep the taxes down.